Before this story begins, take a moment to comment where you are watching from, subscribe to the channel, and stay until the end, because what unfolds is not about smiles alone but about pride, loss, and quiet regret. In a busy care facility outside Manchester, Daniel Harper built his reputation on efficiency, sarcasm, and emotional distance. He believed kindness was optional and sentiment a weakness. When Miguel Santos arrived from the Philippines, carrying an accent, gentle manners, and an ever-present smile, Daniel noticed immediately. That smile followed Miguel through long night shifts, difficult patience, and exhausting routines. It unsettled Daniel, who mistook warmth for naivete and calmness for submission. Around colleagues, Daniel joked that Miguel smiled too much, that life had not tested him properly yet. Laughter followed, and Daniel felt affirmed. Miguel never confronted him. He kept working, kept helping, kept smiling. What Daniel did not understand was that Miguel's smile was learned through years of scarcity, separation, and sacrifice, shaped by responsibility rather than comfort. Their lives overlapped daily, yet Daniel never looked beyond surface impressions. He never asked questions. He never listened. And without realizing it, Daniel was about to lose something he never knew he needed, something that would echo long after Miguel returned home, leaving absence where routine once lived quietly. Daniel's mocking grew subtle, woven into banter and passing remarks that avoided formal complaint but landed sharply nonetheless. He would imitate Miguel's accent during breaks, comment on how cheerful he was despite low pay, and suggest he smiled because he did not understand how things worked in Britain. Miguel heard everything. He chose silence, not because he lacked confidence, but because he understood endurance. Back home in Cebu, his family depended on remittances, and pride demanded composure. Miguel believed that dignity was proven by consistency, not confrontation. Patients adored him. They calmed when he entered rooms, trusting his steady voice and patience. Supervisors noticed his reliability. Daniel noticed this too, and resentment quietly replaced humor. He could not understand why someone he belittled earned admiration so easily. Instead of reflecting, Daniel doubled down, convincing himself Miguel was pretending. Then came the announcement during a routine staff briefing. Miguel would be leaving in 2 weeks. His contract had ended, and family obligations called him back home permanently. The room murmured polite reactions. Daniel felt nothing at first. People came and went. That was life. Yet something shifted as the days counted down. Miguel's smile remained, but now it carried farewell, and Daniel unknowingly began watching more closely than ever before. As Miguel prepared to leave, Daniel noticed the gaps forming before the departure happened. Tasks Miguel handled quietly now required discussion. Patients asked where he was. Schedules felt heavier. Daniel found himself covering shifts Miguel once volunteered for without complaint. Still, pride kept him silent. On Miguel's final week, a frail patient refused assistance from anyone else, asking only for Miguel. Daniel stood nearby, irritated, watching Miguel kneel to eye level, speaking softly about memories, not medicine. The patient smiled. Something uncomfortable stirred in Daniel, an awareness that professionalism without compassion left emptiness behind. On Miguel's last day, colleagues organized a small farewell. There was food, brief speeches, polite applause. Miguel thanked everyone, mentioning lessons learned and friendships formed. When he reached Daniel, he paused, smiled gently, and thanked him too, genuinely. That moment unsettled Daniel more than any accusation could have. Miguel left the next morning. Routine returned immediately, but something was wrong. The care home felt louder yet colder. Laughter faded quicker. Daniel felt irritation without cause. He realized he had relied on Miguel more than he admitted, not just for work, but for balance. The smile he mocked had steadied the room. Without it, Daniel felt exposed to his own harshness. Weeks passed, and the absence became permanent. Daniel caught himself expecting Miguel's voice in corridors, his calm presence during crises. Instead, tension filled the gaps. Complaints increased. Patients seemed restless. Daniel worked harder, but satisfaction never came. One evening, he discovered a note Miguel had left inside a shared locker, thanking the team and wishing everyone peace. It was simple, sincere, and unsigned beyond his name. Daniel read it repeatedly, feeling an unfamiliar tightness. For the first time, he questioned his behavior. Mockery had cost him nothing at the time, yet now regret demanded payment. Daniel searched Miguel online, finding photos of him back home, smiling beside family, working locally, grounded. The smile was the same, but Daniel now saw strength instead of foolishness. He remembered every careless joke, every moment he chose superiority over curiosity. There would be no apology delivered in person. No correction made in time. Daniel began changing quietly, not out of redemption, but recognition. He softened his tone, listened more, helped without being asked. Colleagues noticed. Patients responded. Yet the change felt incomplete. Daniel understood something irreversible had occurred. He had mistaken humility for weakness and lost the chance to know a good man fully. That understanding stayed with him, heavier than guilt, steadier than shame. Months later, a postcard arrived addressed simply to the facility. It showed a Philippine shoreline and a brief message wishing everyone well. Daniel recognized Miguel's handwriting instantly. He stood holding the card longer than necessary, realizing the story between them had ended without resolution. Yet its lesson endured. Daniel no longer mocked smiles. He learned they could hide endurance, generosity, and discipline forged by necessity. Miguel never knew the impact he left behind, how his quiet resilience reshaped someone who once dismissed him. Daniel carried that awareness forward, honoring it through changed behavior rather than spoken regret. In the end, the smile Daniel ridiculed became the standard he measured himself against, a reminder that kindness often outlives cruelty, and humility can outlast arrogance. Loss taught what presence could not. And though Miguel returned home fulfilled, Daniel remained transformed, shaped by absence, learning too late that respect withheld becomes regret remembered. Daniel did not speak about Miguel to anyone, yet his thoughts returned there often, usually during quiet moments when work slowed and reflection crept in uninvited. He remembered the early assumptions he made, how easily he reduced a person to a stereotype shaped by accent, nationality, and demeanor. That realization disturbed him more than fatigue ever had. Daniel had always believed fairness meant equal rules, not equal understanding. Miguel challenged that belief without ever intending to. The care home introduced new staff, but none carried the same calm consistency. Daniel noticed how impatience now spread faster among coworkers, how empathy required effort instead of flowing naturally. He began mentoring younger staff differently, correcting harsh jokes before they formed. When asked why he cared so much suddenly, Daniel deflected with professionalism. Privately, he knew the truth. Miguel's departure had left a mirror behind. Daniel saw himself clearly now, stripped of humor that once disguised insecurity. He wondered if Miguel ever thought about him, or if forgiveness came easily to someone who endured so much quietly. That uncertainty lingered. Daniel accepted it as consequence, understanding that growth did not require closure, only honesty. The smile he once mocked had become a standard of grace he now chased daily, knowing he would never fully reach it but committed to trying regardless, steadily, without applause. Time moved forward, but the lessons settled deeper instead of fading. Daniel transferred to another facility, bringing habits shaped by reflection rather than pride. He listened more than he spoke, learned names carefully, and corrected himself when judgment surfaced too quickly. Occasionally, he encountered new migrant workers, some nervous, others openly warm. Each time, he thought of Miguel. He protected them from ridicule when possible, interrupting harmful humor with firmness that surprised others. Daniel understood now how small comments accumulated weight, how silence could wound as sharply as cruelty. One evening, a new colleague from abroad thanked him quietly for his support. Daniel felt a familiar discomfort, knowing gratitude belonged elsewhere too. He responded simply, encouraging professionalism and respect. Alone later, he acknowledged the truth. He was paying forward something he once dismissed. Miguel had taught without teaching, changed someone without confrontation. Daniel accepted that influence carried responsibility. He no longer sought to dominate conversations or appear superior. Instead, he aimed for steadiness, presence, and fairness. The care work felt different now, heavier but meaningful. Daniel realized compassion required humility, and humility demanded awareness. That awareness stayed with him, guiding decisions long after the memory of jokes faded, anchoring his identity in lessons learned through loss rather than instruction. Years passed, and Daniel's career advanced. He became known for leadership rooted in patience, someone who diffused tension rather than fueled it. During training sessions, he emphasized cultural understanding without preaching, sharing anonymized stories of misjudgment and consequence. Trainees listened closely, sensing sincerity rather than authority. Daniel never mentioned Miguel by name, yet his influence shaped every example. Sometimes, Daniel wondered what his life might look like had Miguel never arrived, had his assumptions gone unchallenged. That thought unsettled him. Growth, he realized, often required discomfort, and discomfort often arrived disguised as people we underestimated. On rare evenings, Daniel searched online again, finding fewer updates but the same gentle smile in older photographs. He hoped Miguel felt fulfilled, valued, respected. Daniel accepted that his own peace depended not on forgiveness granted, but on behavior changed. He understood now that professionalism without humanity was hollow, and humor without empathy was dangerous. The care industry demanded more than competence. It demanded heart. Miguel embodied that truth effortlessly. Daniel spent his remaining years ensuring that truth survived beyond memory, embedded in policy, culture, and daily conduct. The absence that once haunted him transformed into guidance, reminding him that kindness unnoticed could still reshape lives quietly, enduring longer than any moment of mockery ever could. Daniel eventually retired, leaving behind a workplace shaped subtly by his values. On his final day, colleagues gathered, sharing stories of his fairness and calm leadership. Daniel listened, humbled, aware of the irony. Praise once mattered deeply to him. Now it felt secondary. When asked what advice he would give, Daniel spoke about attention, respect, and restraint. He said people often revealed strength in unexpected ways, and ignoring that truth cost more than effort ever would. No one knew the full story behind his words, but they felt their weight. After retirement, Daniel volunteered occasionally, choosing environments that required patience over authority. He found peace in simplicity, in listening rather than directing. Sometimes, he imagined meeting Miguel again by chance, somewhere neutral, without hierarchy or history. He wondered if he would apologize or simply thank him. Daniel accepted he might never know. That uncertainty no longer troubled him. He had learned that accountability lived in action, not confession. Miguel's smile, once misunderstood, had guided Daniel through an entire transformation. That knowledge remained steady, comforting. Even in quiet retirement, Daniel carried forward the lesson that dignity often arrived softly, and recognizing it required humility before time made recognition unavoidable. In the end, Daniel understood that the story was never about mockery alone, but about awareness delayed and growth earned through loss. Miguel's presence had challenged assumptions Daniel did not know he carried, revealing character gaps hidden behind confidence. That realization shaped Daniel's legacy more than any promotion ever did. He learned that people who smile through hardship often carry strength unseen, and dismissing them revealed more about the observer than the observed. Miguel returned home fulfilled, surrounded by family, unaware of the ripple he left behind. Daniel remained, changed permanently, guided by absence turned instruction. Their lives intersected briefly, yet the impact endured decades. Daniel accepted that some lessons arrived without ceremony, and gratitude sometimes traveled only one direction. Still, the value remained. He had learned to look again, listen deeper, and judge slower. That transformation honored Miguel more than words ever could. And so, the smile once mocked became a quiet standard of humanity, reminding Daniel, and those he influenced, that respect delayed becomes regret remembered, but humility learned can reshape a lifetime, one interaction at a time, long after people return home and stories end quietly without applause or closure. Life after retirement slowed Daniel enough to notice patterns he once ignored, especially how often people revealed themselves in small habits rather than loud declarations. He volunteered at a community support center where cultural backgrounds blended daily, and he observed the same quiet dynamics repeating. Some people spoke loudly to assert value. Others worked steadily, unnoticed, carrying burdens without complaint. Daniel always noticed the smiles first now. He understood they could be shields, commitments, or promises to families far away. When new volunteers joined, Daniel welcomed them carefully, never assuming competence or weakness. He remembered Miguel during moments of frustration, using that memory as restraint. The community center thrived quietly, shaped by mutual respect rather than rules. Daniel never told his story, yet it lived in his conduct. People trusted him instinctively, sensing sincerity earned through reflection. At night, Daniel sometimes wondered if Miguel had ever faced mockery elsewhere or if his nature disarmed cruelty before it formed. That question no longer carried guilt, only responsibility. Daniel accepted that he could not rewrite the past, but he could influence the present. Every patient interaction, every gentle correction, every moment of patience became tribute. The lesson remained active, not sentimental. Loss had taught him clarity, and clarity guided him forward steadily. As years accumulated, Daniel noticed society changing slowly around him, yet old prejudices resurfaced in new forms. He recognized them immediately, hearing echoes of his former self in careless jokes and dismissive remarks. When conversations drifted that way, Daniel intervened calmly, offering perspective without accusation. People listened because he spoke from experience, not superiority. He had learned that correction delivered without ego landed deeper. Daniel became a quiet reference point in his community, someone others consulted during conflict. He encouraged listening before reacting, curiosity before judgment. In moments of solitude, Daniel acknowledged how unlikely his transformation once seemed. Miguel's arrival had been ordinary, unannounced, yet decisive. That truth humbled him. Change rarely arrived dramatically. Often, it walked in smiling, endured quietly, and left without demanding recognition. Daniel valued that understanding deeply. He no longer sought validation for doing what felt right. He simply acted consistently. Sometimes, he imagined Miguel reading stories to family members, working with the same diligence he always had. Daniel hoped the world treated him better than he once did. That hope reinforced Daniel's commitment to fairness wherever he stood. The lesson continued, alive and uncompromising. Daniel aged gracefully, carrying his reflections without bitterness. He accepted that growth arrived unevenly across a lifetime, sometimes late, sometimes quietly. Friends asked him how he developed such patience. Daniel smiled, offering simple explanations about learning the hard way. He avoided details, believing lessons lost power when overshared. Instead, he demonstrated them. He listened fully, paused before responding, and treated everyone with deliberate respect. Those habits became instinct. In group settings, Daniel noticed who remained unheard and redirected attention gently. He remembered Miguel doing the same for patience years earlier. That parallel never faded. Daniel recognized now that leadership was not command, but consideration. He regretted nothing more than the time he wasted misunderstanding that truth. Still, regret did not dominate him. Gratitude replaced it. Gratitude for awareness gained, even late. Gratitude for encountering someone whose quiet integrity reshaped his worldview. Daniel's life felt complete not because of success measured externally, but because alignment replaced arrogance internally. He understood that some people entered our lives briefly to correct us, not accompany us. Miguel had done exactly that. Daniel honored it by living differently, allowing humility to guide choices long after pride lost relevance entirely. Near the end of his life, Daniel was asked to speak at a local training seminar about ethics in care work. He accepted reluctantly, unsure his words still mattered. Standing before younger professionals, Daniel spoke about attention, restraint, and respect. He described how assumptions distorted judgment and how humility strengthened practice. He never named Miguel, yet every sentence carried his influence. The audience listened intently, sensing authenticity. Daniel concluded by saying that kindness was not weakness, and smiles were not ignorance. They were often evidence of endurance. The room remained silent afterward, thoughtful rather than impressed. Daniel felt satisfied. He had passed the lesson forward intact. Later that evening, Daniel reflected on the strange symmetry of his journey. Mockery had initiated it. Absence had shaped it. Responsibility sustained it. He accepted that some debts were paid through changed behavior rather than apology. That realization brought peace. Miguel's presence, brief yet powerful, had redirected a life. Daniel believed that was enough. Influence did not require acknowledgement. It required continuation. And Daniel ensured it continued, long after his own voice softened and his steps slowed steadily. When Daniel eventually passed away, those who knew him remembered consistency more than charisma. Stories surfaced about his fairness, his patience, his refusal to judge quickly. No one knew the origin of those traits, but their impact endured. Somewhere across the world, Miguel lived his life fully, unaware that his quiet dignity had rewritten another man's values permanently. That distance did not diminish the truth. Lives intersected briefly could still reshape futures indefinitely. Daniel's journey stood as proof. He began dismissive, confident, unaware. He ended reflective, grounded, changed. The smile he once mocked became his compass. The absence he once ignored became instruction. In that transformation lay the story's meaning. Respect delayed became regret remembered, but humility learned became legacy sustained. Daniel never reclaimed the past, but he redeemed the future through action. And though Miguel returned home long ago, what he left behind remained active, influencing decisions, shaping culture, and reminding those willing to notice that the quietest people often carry the deepest lessons, teaching without teaching, correcting without confrontation, and changing lives simply by being exactly who they are, even when misunderstood at first. Daniel's story did not end with reflection alone. It continued through the quiet influence he left behind in people who never knew his past mistakes. Former colleagues carried his methods into new workplaces, repeating his insistence on patience, fairness, and listening before judgment. Policies shifted subtly, shaped by conversations he once led with care and restraint. Daniel understood that true impact rarely announced itself. It settled slowly, like habit, becoming culture before anyone noticed its origin. In private moments, Daniel reflected on how easily life might have continued without interruption if Miguel had never arrived. That thought reinforced his belief that transformation often came through people we underestimated first. He accepted that regret was not punishment but instruction, guiding behavior long after the mistake passed. Daniel's days became simpler, yet purposeful. He read widely, volunteered selectively, and avoided spaces that rewarded arrogance. When he encountered cruelty disguised as humor, he responded with calm correction, not anger. That restraint surprised people, disarming defensiveness. Daniel believed strength revealed itself most clearly through control, not dominance. Miguel's influence remained present, shaping reactions Daniel once failed to manage. The smile that once irritated him now symbolized endurance, reminding Daniel that humility learned late still mattered deeply, and responsibility accepted quietly could still reshape the world beyond one lifetime. Daniel often wondered how many lives changed indirectly through moments of quiet reflection rather than dramatic apology. He recognized that influence multiplied when carried forward by others who never met the original source. This understanding shaped how he spoke, choosing precision over volume. He encouraged questions instead of certainty and curiosity instead of judgment. When younger caregivers expressed frustration, Daniel reminded them that every interaction left residue. Kindness accumulated slowly, while cruelty lingered longer than intended. He never excused his past behavior, but he refused to let it define his future. Responsibility meant acting better consistently, not perfectly. Daniel found peace in routine acts of fairness, greeting strangers warmly, correcting disrespect calmly, and acknowledging effort publicly. These habits reinforced communities quietly, shaping expectations without confrontation. Daniel accepted that humility was not an endpoint but a practice. Each day offered chances to listen deeper and judge slower. Miguel remained present in that practice, not as memory alone but as compass guiding behavior. Through that guidance, Daniel understood that dignity endured beyond absence, teaching those willing to notice that character revealed itself most clearly in how we treat others when nothing is demanded in return, ever, with sincerity, humility, patience daily. As Daniel's health declined, his perspective sharpened rather than faded. He understood that time compressed priorities, leaving little room for vanity or unresolved ego. Conversations became deliberate, focused on meaning rather than accomplishment. When visitors asked about his proudest moments, Daniel spoke not of promotions but of restraint, of choosing silence over ridicule, patience over dismissal. He emphasized that awareness often arrived after damage, and wisdom lived in response, not timing. Daniel believed everyone carried the capacity to harm unknowingly, and responsibility began with recognizing that truth honestly. Miguel's influence resurfaced constantly, not as regret alone but as reminder. Daniel accepted that some teachers never knew they were teaching. That realization humbled him deeply. He spent his remaining days writing notes to former colleagues, encouraging empathy and attention. None mentioned his past errors, yet every word carried correction. Daniel felt complete knowing his final contribution was continuity of values rather than defense of reputation. He learned that dignity survived through action, not explanation. As life slowed, Daniel felt gratitude outweigh regret. The smile once mocked had reshaped him entirely. That understanding settled gently, confirming that growth, even delayed, remained meaningful until the very end, without exception. Near the final stretch of his life, Daniel reflected on how quietly everything meaningful had unfolded. There were no dramatic confrontations, no public apologies, no formal reconciliations. Yet the transformation was undeniable. He recognized that many people waited for moments that never came, believing change required permission or recognition. Daniel learned otherwise. Change happened when behavior shifted consistently, even without witnesses. He thought about Miguel often, not with sadness, but with appreciation. Miguel represented a truth Daniel once ignored, that gentleness could coexist with strength and humility could anchor resilience. Daniel accepted that some relationships existed only to correct direction, not to last. That acceptance brought peace. He observed how those around him treated one another, noticing echoes of the culture he helped shape. Respect surfaced more quickly now, and careless humor met quiet resistance. Daniel felt content knowing his influence lived beyond him. He believed that legacy was not memory, but momentum. As his days shortened, Daniel focused on gratitude rather than explanation. He trusted that lessons passed forward did not require context to remain effective. The smile that once provoked mockery had become instruction, compass, and closure. Daniel rested in that certainty, knowing the story mattered because it continued through others, invisibly, steadily, long after his own voice softened completely. Daniel spent his final days quietly, content that the lesson born from misunderstanding had outlived him. He no longer measured life by who remembered him, but by how people treated one another after he was gone. He understood that influence rarely announced itself, and the most powerful changes occurred without credit. Miguel's smile had traveled further than either of them ever imagined, reshaping behavior, tempering pride, and softening spaces once hardened by ego. Daniel accepted that some teachers arrived briefly, left early, and remained forever. As his breath slowed, he felt gratitude outweigh regret, knowing he had chosen responsibility once awareness arrived. That choice mattered more than timing. The story closed without reunion, apology, or explanation, yet its meaning endured. Daniel believed that respect, once learned, became obligation. He left the world quieter than he found it, guided by humility learned too late, but practiced faithfully until the end, proving that growth, even delayed, still shaped lives beyond intention, beyond presence, and beyond goodbye, continuing softly wherever kindness replaced judgment, and understanding arrived before harm lingered, quietly teaching others patience, restraint, empathy, and courage without demand recognition, praise, reward, applause, credit, ownership, or acknowledgement ever again. Always forward gently.